lungs have been gross lately. Okay, so today, like I said, is a huge factoring day. It's a good review for you if you are still struggling with factoring. So hopefully this will be a good day, especially if you were not here yesterday. We're going to simplify rational expressions. So if you were here yesterday, it's going to be the same exact thing we did yesterday, but the only thing that's going to be different is we're actually just going to finish it out. So you know how yesterday we crossed something out? Well, okay, what's left then? That's the only new part today, taking it slow. And, you know, we took it slow across the board, honors, regular, here. We took it this slow in every single class, okay? Because we want to make sure that you truly understand each piece of this chapter. So when we simplify something, like we did for this example here, you notice all they did was basically divide each piece by 5. Okay, so let's look at the very first one. What number goes into both 24 and 18? 4 does not go into 18, careful. What? 8 does not go into 18 either. 3 does go into both. Is there something higher? 6. So I'm going to divide the top and the bottom by 6, and I am left with what over what? 4 over 18 divided by 6? 3. There you go. That's it. Okay, so that's just kind of warming you up to what we're doing today. We're just going to be simplifying some fractions. Okay, so now let's look at this next one. What number goes into 49 and 14? 7. So I'm going to divide both the top and bottom by 7. And then what else is common? If you notice, just like our factoring, I have 3 x's and I have 1 x's. What else is common? How many x's can I factor out? One of them. So I'm going to divide both the top and bottom by 7x. And let's see what's left. Well, 49 divided by 7 is what? Now be careful with this one. X cubed divided by x. What is left? X squared. Very good. Because you started with 3, we canceled 1 out. Now we only have 2 left. Now 14x divided by 7x is just, careful, 2. No, you're fine. All good. 7 plus 7 is 14. Do you have any questions on just like the basics simplifying? Yeah.
Can you go back to
Mm-hmm. Oh, we opened both windows. Sorry, I'm pulling them out. Right. Oh my gosh. That one's easy. I can't do that one. Okay. All right. So now let's talk about these next ones. So these ones are going to get a little bit tougher. How this is going to work is just like yesterday. I'm going to do one with you, and then you're going to try on your own, because the more you practice by yourself, the better you get at it. Okay, so there are 3 steps. The first 2 steps we already did yesterday. The last step is going to be the end here. So let's talk about the first step. It just says to factor. So the first step we're going to factor. Oop, I think I broke my pen when I was over there. Hold on. Okay, 1. All right, the first step. Can I factor a number out of the top part of our fraction here? Yeah, I heard it. Yeah, a 6. I can divide both of those pieces by 6, and if it helps you to write that out for yourself, do it. You know, some people have to write that divided by 6, and some people don't, and that's okay. So 6x divided by 6 gets me what? Yeah, x. And then what's negative 36 divided by 6? Good, negative 6. And we're done with that. The bottom, can we factor the bottom at all? No, so we're done with that piece too. There we go. That's the factoring part. Then step 2 says to list the excluded values. Okay? That's what makes this bottom piece equal to 0. So if you were not here, I'm going to sum up what yesterday was. So some of you might not have to write all this out because you were here yesterday. But you would just do x minus 6 equals 0. What would you do to both sides? Yeah, add 6. So x is going to equal 6 here. So that is my excluded value. X cannot be 6. Excluded value means that you're excluding it from something. You're not existing. And that's why we have that slash with the equal sign. It means does not equal 6. I'm going to ask you this question because this is where I saw the most people were incorrect on their homework when I walked around. Is this 6 a whole or an asymptote? Yeah, I heard it. A whole, and I'm going to explain that. I'm going to keep doing it. I didn't ask you guys to do it on this, but I think it helped a lot last period. If you cancel something out, I'm going to draw this little line here. If you cancel it out, it creates a whole. So it's a whole because we're canceling this out. If we did not cancel it, it would be called something like a vertical asymptote, which those are just definitions. We'll get more into the details of really what is happening around those points tomorrow. Okay, so really just kind of knowing if it cancels as a whole is all you really need to know at this point. Now the last part, if you look here, it says simplified expression. Well, the only thing that's left in green is what? Positive 6, we're done. Okay, so the simplified expression just means after you cancel something out, what's left? Oh, 6. We're done. Nothing else to do here. So if you kind of look at this, same thing as yesterday, this 6 part is the only new part, which I think is not that bad. Okay, but I wanted to practice the factoring part. So I'm going to have you guys do 4. So the top one and the bottom one. This one that we just did is just like number 4. So please take a minute and a half and attempt number 4 on your own. Because if you can mimic what I did, the more practice you do, the better you will get at it yourself without my help. But I will walk around and see how you're doing. And if you want to work together, you definitely can. You're doing number 4. Because number 4 is exactly like the one we just did. Kind of like I do one, you do one, I do one, you do one. Because sometimes you're like, oh guys, this is easy. And then like you go home, you're like, crap, how do I do this? Because you didn't practice too much. And some of the feedback I got back from your tests, like I actually do read those when you guys write like a comment on there. Like I'm like, oh, what can I do better? You said like some people wrote more problems in class, like practicing them. So I took that in and I put it in. Mm-hmm.
Did I do this right so far?
You did, yeah. Good job.
So wouldn't it be 7?
X cannot be what?
Wouldn't it be equal 7 plus 7? Think 3 equals 7?
It's not going to equal 7, but when we subtract it over, it's going to be,
0.
yeah, subtract. So what's 0 minus 7?
Negative 7.
Yeah, there you go. Mm-hmm. What'd you say? You may.
Then we would divide it by whatever number goes in, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I know some people are still working. Please still work. I just want to show those that are done what we're doing here. Step 1 was to factor. Step 2 was to find your excluded value. And step 3 is to simplify. Now, obviously, when you're doing your homework or your test, you don't have to write all of that out. I'm just showing you like what the steps are to simplifying it here. Okay. And I just labeled for you, and I would like you to label too that it's a whole to get you practice knowing the difference between a whole and a vertical asymptote. The whole cancels. I'm going to say it so much that like you'd be sleeping and it'll be popping in your head. Wholes cancel. Okay? Do you have any questions about this one? Did anyone get it wrong that would like me to explain something, a part of it? Okay. All right, let's go on to the next one. Like I said, this is, I know we're kind of moving slower at a slower pace, but I think it was super successful yet last period, and I'm just going to keep doing it. So take a look here. The top and bottom, one of those doesn't factor. Which one, the top or the bottom? The bottom. So I'm just going to write that out for myself so I know that I don't have to do anything with the bottom. But the top, you can kind of look, there's a lot going on. Most likely I'm going to have to do something. If there's a lot going on, like the top piece here, you're most likely going to factor something out. Now, if you look here, what would be the GCF of 5x cubed and 10x squared? What number goes into both of them? 5. Okay, so I know for sure a 5 is going to come out in red. How many x's can come out? 3 or 2? 2. So you always want to take the lowest degree. So 5x squared is my GCF, which means it's coming out, and I'm going to create whatever's left over in parentheses here. And maybe write this out for yourself, divided by 5x squared, divided by 5x squared, so you know what we're about to do. Here we go. 15 divided by 5 is 3. X cubed divided by x squared gets me how many x's left? 1x. Very good. Now we have 10 divided by 5, which is 2, and the x's go away. Pretty straightforward. That's just called GCF. Factor by GCF. You're just taking something that's common and you're removing it from the problem. You're taking it out. Okay, step 2 is to find the excluded value. So for this one, I would recommend to actually write it out unless you have that mental capacity where you know what to do with it. The 3x plus 2, we got to set it equal to 0. So we always take that bottom piece, we set it equal to 0. What do I got to do first? Very good. You subtract 2. When I do that, I get 3x equals negative 2. Questions there? So I just subtracted 2 to both sides. Then what do I do to both sides? Yeah, I divide by 3. So I get x equals negative 2 over 3. And that is now my excluded value. Yes? The bottom, yes. Always the bottom. For excluded values, you always got to just talk about the bottom. That's it. Okay, now let's talk about that piece that we just wrote. We just talked about this 3x plus 2. Does it cancel with anything on top? It does. Look, here we go. I'm going to cancel it out. What did that now create? A vertical asymptote or a hole? A hole. Whenever it cancels, like we just did in purple, you've now created this thing called a hole, which tomorrow we will look more in depth of what that actually means. But just getting you practice on this is going to help you out. But if you look here, I'm going to highlight this piece. So if you have your highlighter, highlight that piece. That's all that's left. It's 5x squared. And that's my simplified version. 5x squared. So like I said, this, if you were not here, was all yesterday. This 5x squared is the only new piece. So it's like extra practice from yesterday if you were struggling, which some of you told me when I walked around. This is as far as I could get. Well, this is the same thing. This is what we did yesterday. This piece is new. This purple piece. Okay? So now that we did that one, I want you to try the one below it. I would like you to try 5. Again, I do 1, you do 1. The more practice you do, the better you get. I'll leave my example up here so that you can use it as a reference. But I would really like you, I'll give you like 2 minutes for this one and kind of test out how you would do on number 5. Number 5 is where we're going now. If you want to work together with someone, you're more than welcome to. Maybe sometimes they can explain it better than me, which is definitely possible. What are you over here? Good. Good. You just need to put the 6x on the outside then. Or the 6x squared on the outside. Like how we had the 5x squared. There you go. And now you should be good. So then whatever's left is 6x squared. What number can go in both 12 and 6? Higher. You're right. 6. Good. Okay. Yeah. Well, 3 works too, but you want to go the highest as possible. So 6. And then how many x's can I take out of both? 3 or 2? 2. So you want to divide both by 6x squared. Good. 2, you're right. Because 12 divided by 6 gives me 2. Good. How are you doing over here? Good. That's 6x squared. So then we want to write 6x squared all around the outside like we did with this one. And then what is 12 divided by 6? 2. So write 2. And then x cubed divided by x squared. Period. And then 6x squared divided by 6x squared. Yeah. So nice one. Good job. Yes and no.
Which one?
You have it right. It's because of the answer would be 1/2.
Okay.
So you have it right. I think it's the way that you wrote it. Yeah.
I divided it. I didn't know that it was a fraction, so that
Yeah.
makes sense now. What one?
Yeah, because it's 1 divided by 2. I'll write it out on here. Okay? You got one, try. I know this is tough, the factoring part. The hardest part of chapter 9, which is what we're on, is remembering how to factor from this whole entire semester. Like I said, I will give you a graphic organizer sometime this week, like saying, hey, if there's 2 terms, this is what you have to do. If there's 3 terms, you do this. Okay, and I walked around, a lot of you got to this point. You took out a 6x squared, which is great. I think some people, because this is like in your way, it's hard for you to think about it. Because usually we would write like underneath divide by 6x squared. But we are going to divide both of them by 6x squared, if you need to write it out for yourself, which gives us 2x minus 1 here. One of the biggest mistakes that we have seen across the board is that people forget to write this out in front when you factor. Across the board. See it all the time in any classes. Okay, so on the bottom we can't do anything else, so I'm just going to leave that be. The next part is to figure out your excluded values. So that was step 1. Step 2, this part you have to set equal to 0. I would recommend it when it's not right in front of your face what the answer is. This is the only one that's kind of like that. I would add 1 to both sides and I would get 2x equals positive 1. Now the next step here is to divide by 2. When you divide by 2 in green, it doesn't make it 2, it makes it 1/2. So x cannot be 1/2. So be careful with that. Remember, you want x to be alone, so x should remain here. You shouldn't be dividing by an x either. Okay? Now, I will ask you, is the 1/2 a whole or an asymptote? So an asymptote would mean that it does not cancel with something on top. It does, and I'll draw an arrow, kind of getting you practice here. This arrow is telling me that this guy is a whole. The fact that this cancels with this on top creates this hole in the graph. If it did not cancel, if this was not up here, you would create a vertical asymptote. So that's what you have to ask yourself. Does that bottom piece cancel with anything on top? If it does, whole. If it doesn't, vertical asymptote. Okay? And then this piece that I highlight is left over, so 6x squared that's all that's left. Do you have any questions on that? Okay, please take your time on these. That's why I do not assign a lot of problems for homework. I really would like you to just breathe and take your time on these. Okay? Let's look at number 3. The top, I cannot factor, so I'm just going to rewrite it. What about the bottoms? And I remember how to do this piece because we did this yesterday, and I feel like people are usually good with it. We do the square root. Very good. What is the square root of x squared? Good. And what's the square root of 9? So does anyone remember how we write that? Very good. X plus 3 and x minus 3. Either way that you write it, it's just fine as long as you have both of those down there. I like those factoring ones. I think they're the easiest. I think the GCF ones for a lot of you and for myself is harder than like ones like that. Okay? Now, the second step is to find your excluded values. So this is step 2. And I'm going to write it out for everyone just because I feel like most people in here are writing it equal to 0, and that's good. That's fine. If you don't write equal to 0, you can just skip this step. How many excluded values will I have here? 2, because there are 2 x's on the bottom, which means there are 2 excluded values. Okay, so I have x plus 3 is equal to 0, and x minus 3 equals 0. I would really like you, if you keep getting the excluded values wrong, to do this every time and write them out. Okay? So what would I do to the first one of both sides? Good, I would subtract 3. So x cannot be negative 3. That's one of my excluded values. What about the other one? Good, plus 3. Do we have questions there? And I'm just going to draw an arrow because I don't want to rewrite it. Okay, one of them, just one, is a whole. Only one of them. The regular 3 is a whole, and you are correct, and here's why. In red, if I take this line, if you take a look here, I'm going to draw a little arrow. That x minus 3 cancels, which creates this hole. So I'm actually going to write this there just so that you remember that that would create a hole. Does the x plus 3 cancel with anything on top? No, so that's called a vertical asymptote. I'm gonna write that there so that you remember. It's gonna be super important tomorrow that you could identify that. Yep.
On the test, would you mark off if, for example, step 2 it says x plus 3? Would you mark points off if we didn't put x minus 3? Like if we subtracted it, like you said?
Oh, yeah, no. Mm-mm. Yeah. Nope. Okay, you show as much work as you need to on the test to get the right answer. As long as you understand that one's positive, one's negative, we're good to go. Now, here's kind of the tricky part here when it comes to the simplified version. So in yellow, that's what's left over. But there's something left on top, but we just don't know what it is. Well, we do. What is it? It's not 0. It's what? There's no x's. 1. Whenever, like, think about this. If you do 3 divided by 3, you get 1. Well, x minus 3 divided by x minus 3 also gets me 1. So I actually have 1 over x plus 3. Okay? All right. I would like you to do the one below it. Again, really try to do it. Take your time. Look at my example. Ask a partner. Ask me. Okay? But I would really like to see how you do on this. Okay? I'm moving slow this chapter because I don't want to lose you because you can't factor. So you got to try 6. And I'll leave my example up there for you. Give me 1 second. Good. Now, one more step. Figure out what's left over. You want to find like this simplified version like we did here. This part, I'll scroll. You see what the answer is? Because there's a 1 on top. So 1 over x plus 3, so be careful on that part. Are we doing? You were good, square root 1. There you go, you got it. You're doing great. Good. 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 It's 8.
So what do you do if we don't cross? What is showing?
7, 6.
Yeah. Oh, it's supposed to be 8.
There you go.
Oh,
Good.
that just threw off.
What'd you say?
I said that just throws off everything.
It's okay. Now it'll all work out, right? 98% of you are done, which is awesome. Now, I didn't write mine on the blanks, but I did write them like as you can see it. So that first line would be this guy, and I wrote this guy as a whole because look, it cancels in purple. Again, keep working right now if you are not done. Flip the page when you are, so I know I could move on. I don't want to rush you. Okay, so this next one, again, the hardest part is just the factoring part. I think 7 out of all of them is probably the tougher of the bunch, 7 and 9. Eight's pretty straightforward. I'm actually gonna kind of go out of order because I think 8 is better to start with than 7 is. So we're gonna do 8 first, and then we'll do 7. Okay, so 8. If you look at the top, there's nothing to factor, so I'm just gonna rewrite it. This is step 1, x plus 8. On the bottom, this is going way back, not really way back, but last chapter. There are 1, 2, 3 terms, which means you must do what's called the MA table, what multiplies to add. Okay, so what multiplies, draw a little arrow on my side here, what multiplies to negative 48, but also adds to the middle term of 2.
6, 8.
Good. So Riley right away said 6 and 8. Some of you will be able to just bust that out real quick and say 6 and 8. Some of you will have to write out all the terms, and that's okay. So I'm going to write them all out just for those that need it. So I have 1 and 48. That doesn't work. 48 divided by 2. Where's my thing? 48 divided by 2 is 24. Still not going to work here. Again, if you're someone that got 6 and 8 right away, don't do all this work right now. 3 and 16 doesn't work. Let's try 4. 48 divided by 4. 4 and 12. Still not going to get me 2. The last one, 5 doesn't work, but 6 does, like Riley said, 6 and 8. Can someone tell me which one, 6 or 8, needs to be positive? The 8. Because the bigger number needs to be the sign that we're looking for. So that's why I have negative 6 and a positive 8. So that's going like way back. Not way back, but you know, this whole year we've been kind of doing that mod table. So in purple, I'm going to continue with the same color. I have x minus 6 and x plus 8. So once you get those numbers, it's pretty quick. Like, boom. I'm only going to give you guys easy factoring ones. I'm not going to throw some difficult ones at you here. Okay. Second step. How many excluded values am I going to have? How many? I can't hear. Sorry. People are saying stuff. Well, on the bottom, there are 1, 2 x's, so I will have 2. X cannot be what number for this very first one? 6. So for those that are a little bit quicker, you just flip the sign. What about the second one? X cannot be what? Good, negative 8. Do we have questions on the excluded values? Only one of them is a whole. Is it the 6 or the negative 8? Careful.
8.
The 8, here's why, because watch. This x plus 8 and x plus 8 cancel, so you can see my little arrow. The negative 8 then means it's going to be a whole. So I'm going to write the whole here. Whatever is left over is going to be your vertical asymptote. So whatever cancels, whole. Whatever doesn't, vertical asymptote. So there is a 1 left on top. I'm going to take my highlighter. 1 over x minus 6 is my final answer here. So 1, step 3. 1 over x minus 6. Okay? Question? If there's 2, you would just write them out. So I would have x does not equal 6. You can put comma negative 8, or you can write it again, x does not equal negative 8. So I'm just rewriting here. You don't have to, but I just rewrote it on the blanks. I was just trying to let you guys see visually, you know, where things are. Okay. Go ahead and do number 11, please. So do 11, give it a try. Make sure you know how to do it. if you look at number 11, it's the same thing as the one above it, but if you notice, the fraction just flipped on you. So like here, the MA table is on the top than it is on the bottom. So that if you compare the two, the MA table will be here instead of on the bottom, like the one we just did. So being able to kind of apply it. Mm-hmm. Good. Not 6 and 4, actually.
When you're adding to 24.
Negative 24. I can see why you think it's 6 and 4, but the only way to make negative 10 with 6 and 4 would be negative 6 and negative 4. And when you multiply them, you get positive 24. You gotta be careful on that one. That one's a toughie. This one's kind of a. Mhm. When you're done, you can kind of see like the first step I did. Kind of see how what I did up here, you can kind of see what, if you were on the right track, where you went wrong maybe. For this one, I will tell you that the MA table was kind of tough because there was a couple of them that you can think worked. Me and Riley were kind of talking back and forth here on which ones would work because 6 and 4 looks like it would work because 6 plus 4 is 10. But there's no way to multiply to negative 24 and get a negative 10 when we add them. Okay, so 1 and 24 wouldn't work. 2 and 12 actually do. And it would be positive 2 and a negative 12. Okay. For the rest of today, we're just going to do 2 questions together, and then that's it. No, you have homework, but I wanted to only do 2 more or 1 more with you maybe, and then let you guys kind of be on your own. So I'm actually going to go to number 12. Why does this keep popping up? I don't understand what this is.
Go to the key thing.
I'll just do that later. I'm not going to do that right now. I need to do this. Okay. So I want to do number 12, but I need to change something on the notes. Here. Hold on. I'm going to change this to a 2. If you guys can change that to a 2 for me, that'd be great. Okay. So let's go ahead and do this. What can I factor out? This is called GCF. What can I factor out on the top? What number goes into both? This is GCF. 4. And then how many x's can I take out? 2 or 1? 1. So I have 4x. What is left inside? Let's see. 12x squared divided by 4x gets me what? What'd you say? Good. 3x. Do you have questions on how we got that piece? Okay, negative 4x divided by 4x gets me negative what? 1. Very good. Questions there. Okay, let's go to the bottom. What can I factor out of? What's the GCF of 18x and 2x? What number comes out? Careful with the 3. 2. Someone said 2. Okay, 6 would be too high because 2 divided by 6 wouldn't work. But definitely 2 does. 2 can come out, and one of the x's as well. So 2x. Okay? Now let's see what's left over. 18 divided by 2 is 9. Okay? And then x squared divided by x just gets me x. Then I have negative 2x divided by 2x just gets me minus 1. Now let's take a look here. There's really not much going on here like what we're used to. But we're going to look at both of these. So I have 2x equals 0. 2x equals 0. So what can't x be when we divide by 2? What happens? What do I get? 0. Yeah, a lot of people get confused on this one. But when you divide by 2 to both sides, you're just left with 0. So that's that guy in yellow. Let's talk about the guy in blue here. we have to set that equal to 0 and solve. So 9x minus 1 equals 0. What do I got to do to both sides for this one? It is currently subtracting 1, so you would add 1. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides, and I get 9x equals 1. Then what would I do? Yeah, divide by 9 in purple. So I get x cannot be 1 over 9. That's not anything new. I just wrote all the work out for you this time. So that's step 2, was the excluded values. Now, this is kind of a interesting one. One of them is a whole. Can you tell me which one? Is it the 0 or the 1/9? Which one's going to cancel with something on top? You see how these x's go away? That's the only thing that actually cancels. If it's the same on top as it is on the bottom, it creates this hole. So I wanted to make sure that you guys saw this type of problem because it creates a hole just because there's a 1x on both the top and the bottom. Okay, the very last thing that we need to do is just figure out what's left over. So in blue, that's left over. This piece is left over. Well, what is 4 divided by 2 here? So this red part, what is 4 divided by 2? 2. So this is kind of a toughie. So this one's going to be 2 parentheses 3x minus 1 all over 9x minus 1. Okay, and it's okay to have a long one like that. Okay, you guys have about like 9 minutes, and I'm going to have you guys cross off one of them, so you only have 5 questions. I would really appreciate if you guys take your time and you try it. I know that factoring is difficult. I get it. Okay, but you gotta at least give it a go. If you're struggling, maybe rewatch the video. Use the resources that you have on Google. Maybe look up the question and kind of see what someone does to get the answer. If I had the internet as much as you guys did, I would be a genius in high school. Because like there's so many resources out there for you guys to figure out how to do something if you don't know how. You guys can cross out 4. So I just want you to take your time. So just do the 5 questions, 1 through 3. 1 through 3, in my opinion, are pretty straightforward. That's the first page we did. I feel like you guys rocked it on the first page. The second page we got a little iffy on, just because it was a little challenging with the factoring. But I think 5 and 6 will be just fine for you guys. So you guys can skip 4 for now. Okay, every class period I kind of switch what I do. So your class period might be different than last period. I think last period got through all of it. So I wanted to make sure that you guys got what you needed, okay? Ask me questions. I wanted to make